Hi, it's Katrina. Imagine a world where ancient civilizations held secrets far beyond our understanding. What if the mythical city of Atlantis left behind hidden symbols scattered across the globe, waiting to be deciphered? Evidence of a lost global civilization can be found all over the planet. Today's video is going to focus on the lost symbols of Atlantis, from a stone tablet outlining the real Noah's Ark to a war between monkeys and vampires. So let's get into it. Noah's Ark is real. A stone tablet from 4,000 years ago might just change history. The tablet describes a round ark from ancient times that might just prove the story of the biblical flood is real. There was a flood, it did destroy an antediluvian society, and Noah did build an ark. Have you heard of Irving Finkel? Irving Finkel is one of the few people in the world who can read the ancient cuneiform text of Mesopotamia. He also wrote a book about Noah's Ark, and he said, and I quote, "I am 107% convinced the Ark never existed." That's a bold statement from the man who wrote a book about it. As you may already know, the flood story from the Bible is not the original version. The story of a global flood has been told by many ancient civilizations around the world. One of the earliest flood myths was written long before the Bible even existed. But then one day, someone contacted Irving out of the blue and brought him a worn clay tablet with 60 lines of cuneiform. Of course he was eager to see what it said. Not in a million years had he suspected the tablet would contain the original version of the flood myth. This is the story of how the legend of the flood was included in the Bible. Most scholars agree that when the Israelites were stuck in Babylon during their exile, they learned about the Babylonian flood myths. The Israelites then copied and adapted the ancient stories they heard in Babylon when they sat down to write the Bible. The Hebrew story of the flood kept the same premise as the ancient version about one man building a boat to save himself and his family from the wrath of God. Archaeologists have known about this alternate flood myth since the early part of the 19th century. Numerous clay tablets have been found in Mesopotamia that tell this important story. However, the tablet brought to Irving Finkel is unique. It's the only one that's ever been found with precise instructions for how to build an ark. Forget what you think you thought you knew about the ark. It is not a normal boat. This 4,000-year-old tablet describes a circular boat, like a bowl, huge and saucer-shaped, lashed together with chunks of wood and lengths of rope. The tablet gives the exact dimensions of the circular ark, the precise lengths of rope you would need, and the kind of bitumen used to build it. Bitumen is a black, thick, sticky substance like tar that could be used to fill in gaps and holes and make things waterproof. Irving says the meticulous details on the tablet don't necessarily prove that the vessel definitely existed. What it proves is that whoever wrote the tablet had intimate knowledge of shipbuilding. Irving still actually isn't convinced that Noah's Ark was real, but he did admit that the tablet is one of the most important human documents ever found. Irving said this new discovery is going to send ripples through the world of Ark hunters. People have been trying to find the remnants of the Ark in Turkey's Mount Ararat for centuries. Now they'll be looking for a circular shipwreck. Perhaps there was more than just one Ark. What if these huge saucer-shaped ships were all the rage in the days before the flood? Perhaps human civilization was connected through shipping routes, and others were more clever than other people, building all kinds of ships to prepare for this flood. Irving's clay tablet is set to go on display at the British Museum, placed right next to another very important tablet. This other tablet is the earliest known map of the world. The ancient map shows the lands of Babylon, with the border of the known world drawn as a river along the edge of the map. Beyond that river are some islands. According to an inscription on the back of the map, one of the islands is a shipwrecked ark. It seems like the Babylonians knew about these humongous boats that were so big they formed islands in the ocean. Maybe they were even floating cities, or like cruise ships of the past. The secrets of the Djed. Before the rise of the pyramids and the rule of the pharaohs, Egypt was already home to a civilization steeped in ancient wisdom. Within their sacred symbols lies a connection to a time long forgotten, a time when humanity may have possessed knowledge far beyond our current understanding. In ancient Egypt, there were 3 crucial symbols that could be found drawn in hieroglyphics all over mortuary temples and monuments. But there is more to these symbols than just secret meanings. One of them could be evidence of lost technology from the antediluvian world. Those 3 symbols are the Ankh, the Djed, and the Was. They could often be found together as part of the Was scepter, a representation of power over life. I'm sure you've seen the Ankh before, even if you don't know what it means. To the Egyptians, the Ankh was the symbol of life and eternity. The earliest Christians in Egypt took the Ankh for themselves, turning it into the sign of Christ in Christianity. The Was is a symbol of power and looks sort of like a crowbar. Then there is Djed. It was the symbol of stability and the backbone of Osiris, god of the underworld. It's one of the most reproduced symbols from the ancient Egyptian religion. It can be found in just about every religious text there is. The Djed is also one of the oldest symbols in the world. It's been found in the funerary pyramid of the pharaoh Djoser in Saqqara. The Djoser pyramid was the first pyramid ever built in Egypt. It dates to the 27th century BC, making it more than 4,600 years old. The fact that the Djed is in this ancient building suggests it's been around for a seriously long time. It was likely around even before the pharaohs, maybe before Egypt was even born. What it originally meant is a bit of a mystery. It's been guessed that the Djed symbol was a pillar holding up the sky, or it may have been connected to some of the older Egyptian gods like Sekher and Ptah. It wasn't until the New Kingdom that the Djed was drawn next to the Ankh. Right around that time, the symbol became associated with Osiris. It morphed from a simple pillar-shaped symbol into the god's spinal column, the very thing that kept Osiris upright and alive. The deeper you look, the more you find the Djed symbol in ancient Egypt. It's also represented in the scepters of Thoth, who is the god of magic, and Khonsu, god of the moon. Now, I want you to take a much closer look at the Djed symbol. Doesn't it look familiar? Doesn't it kind of look exactly like a modern high-voltage insulator? When you scrutinize the Djed, it doesn't look like a pillar. Definitely not like the typical pillars seen in Egyptian temples, Greek buildings, or Roman theaters. The Djed symbol looks like advanced technology. People have gone as far as to ask, what if this symbol is not a representation of Osiris's spine, but rather a memory of a higher technology possessed by a lost civilization? Perhaps the mythical lost people of Atlantis. If the Djed symbol is the oldest one in Egypt, it could have come from an even older civilization. When talking about Atlantis, it's impossible not to talk about ancient technology. The Atlanteans supposedly had access to machines, electrical components, advanced scientific knowledge, and basically were much more tech-savvy than any other civilization that came after them until the 21st century. Now it's time for a quick break because it's shoutout time! I wanted to give a big thank you to Again Gagnon for the super thanks. It really means a lot. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The Raw Material of Atlantis. The search for Atlantis may finally be over. There have been at least 5 recent news stories about new discoveries related to Atlantis, so it's tough to know which one to believe. But listen to this and then let me know what you think. A shipwreck has just revealed some evidence from the lost city. In the wreckage of a ship that sank to the bottom of the sea 2,600 years ago, researchers say they found irrefutable proof that Atlantis existed. A large quantity of strange metal bars were found in the shipwreck, believed to be the rare metal used by the incredibly advanced Atlanteans. And it wasn't silver or gold. The disappearance of Atlantis is considered one of the greatest mysteries ever. Did it exist or not? Greek philosopher Plato wrote that the Atlanteans disappeared around 9,600 BC. But where did they go? And where did they even come from? There are a few theories for where Atlantis went that you may not have even heard of because they are a little out there. For example, some say Atlantis never disappeared under the waves at all. We might never find Atlantis because their whole civilization may have escaped planet Earth. Their whole city may have blasted off to the stars. There is a theory that states Atlantis was an alien civilization. They were only on this planet for a while, but when trouble started on Earth, they left. Another theory is that Atlantis didn't sink, but was annihilated in an epic nuclear war. The war was so destructive that not a single trace of their civilization was left. The bombs went off all around the globe, causing earthquakes, tsunamis, and rampant destruction. The topography of the world was completely changed. Atlantis will never be found because its ruins could be a mile below mountains right now. That's how much the world's geography could have shifted during the nuclear conflict that ended Atlantis. Anyway, let's get back to the discovery on the shipwreck. A team of marine archaeologists recovered a total of 39 ingots from a sunken ship off the coast of Sicily. The ingots appear to be a type of red metal called orichalcum. This is really exciting because in ancient Greek texts, orichalcum was described as a metal that could only be found in Atlantis. For the researchers, this was real evidence of Atlantis found at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Ingots of their own unique red metal not found anywhere else in the world. According to Professor Sebastiano Tusa, the ingots were likely being transported from Gila in the south of Sicily to somewhere in Greece. The ship carrying the metal must have gotten caught in a large storm, sinking just before it could enter the Sicilian port. It's been dated to the first part of the 6th century BC. Scientists can usually trace the composition of a metal to a specific place on the planet, but in this case, they've had a very difficult time doing so. According to those same ancient Greek texts, orichalcum was invented by Cadmus, a character from Greek myth. Plato said orichalcum came from Atlantis. He said the whole city of Atlantis was lit up by the flashing red light of the orichalcum. This is what makes people think the Atlanteans had advanced technology or lost knowledge, since they were apparently able to produce light. Plato also said the orichalcum metal was second only in value to gold, and was mined from Atlantis specifically. Modern scientific analysis has shown that the orichalcum ingots are likely a copper alloy made by a process called carburizing. This is done by taking zinc ore, carbon, and copper metal and melting them down. However, the truth is that making these ingots wasn't particularly difficult 2,600 years ago, at a time when Atlantis was long gone. But the researchers have proposed that even if these ingots were made too recently to have come from Atlantis, that doesn't mean they have nothing to do with Atlantis. The technique could have been passed down over thousands of years, resulting in an inferior version of orichalcum. Inferior compared to what the original Atlanteans created before the flood. What do you think? Is this discovery really evidence that Atlantis existed? Let me know in the comments. A world of debauchery. A new genetic study has turned up the heat on ancient human civilization. Apparently, humans were getting pretty freaky, and before the flood, the world was basically Sin City on a global scale. This study shows that antediluvian people lived in a world of debauchery. By comparing the DNA of modern humans to our most ancient ancestors, scientists have discovered evidence of rampant interbreeding and widespread promiscuous behavior. Without getting too graphic, I'll say that the study proves that humans were not picky when it came to who they were getting down with more than 10,000 years ago. The real shocker is just how similar the new study is to the biblical account of the antediluvian world expressed in the Bible. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. God brought about the legendary flood due to human behavior. Most specifically of all, though, due to humanity's obsession with promiscuity. Not only were people extremely violent, but also constantly indulged in sinful desires. Regardless of opinion, scientists have found that the picture painted in the Bible is surprisingly accurate to reality. For example, scientists have identified 3 different species of human that were on this planet 40,000 years ago. All 3 of them were interbreeding. Those 3 would be Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans. Some scientists think there was so much interbreeding that you can hardly classify each species as its own species. Dr. Joshua Schreber said a better way to label the species is to term them as groups, calling them different groups of humans. The pre-flood world was one of different human groups intermixing. Dr. Schreber's ideas are backed up by DNA evidence. Neanderthal DNA is virtually no different from the DNA of modern humans. It's close enough that they had perfectly healthy babies together. Some biblical scholars have gone as far as to say that Neanderthals were the Nephilim, and that's why they don't exist anymore. They were still human, just big and evil. They had to be destroyed for their wickedness. They take it even further to show that perhaps everyone was once all together in one big global tribe. The Bible claims all men and women came from a single pair, Adam and Eve, and that we branched out over the earth as a species. We took our customs, clothing, language, music, and traditions with us as we expanded our human empire. This could explain why so many cultures separated by so many thousands of miles came up with the same stories about bloods, giants, and gods. The were-monkeys of ancient India. You've heard of werewolves, and maybe you even heard of were-panthers and were-bears before. But what about the were-monkeys of ancient India? These mythical creatures appear in Indian folklore and Hindu myth. They are known as Vanaras, super intelligent monkey creatures that were created by the god Brahma to battle the Rakshasas. The Vanaras look sort of like humans, but can change into monkey form in an instant. When they do that, they have increased strength and grow a tail strong enough to lift a fully grown man and throw him across the room. They are also able to continue speaking in their human language when they turn into monkeys. The Rakshasas are another bizarre race found in Indian mythology, but far scarier than the Vanaras. They also feature in Islamic myth, Jainism, and Buddhism. They have supernatural powers, practice cannibalism, and wreak general havoc. The Rakshasas are shape-shifting demons that look like fierce and ferocious monsters, equipped with fangs and sharp claws. They hunt based on human smell, have flaming red eyes, and drink blood from human skulls. Some scholars think the Rakshasas inspired the original tales of vampires in Western mythology. Rakshasas could fly, suck blood, disappear into the night, and change into the form of any creature. Coincidentally, Dracula could fly, disappear in misty vapor, and shapeshift into a wolf or a bat. According to Indian folklore, the Vanaras assisted a federation of kings in fighting against the Rakshasa in a monumental battle. The evil vampiric demons were trying to take over India, and the super strong monkeys came to stop them. When all was said and done, the demons were defeated and the monkeys went into hiding in the Tangareshwar forest. They are said to still be in that forest today, though no one has ever seen one. Why did all of these civilizations and cultures come up with similar creatures? Even the sci-fi version of the Anunnaki has been connected to these monkey creatures. The story goes that when the Anunnaki got here hundreds of thousands of years ago, they were alone with prehistoric beasts and primitive mammals. But they were here for a reason. The Anunnaki wanted to extract the precious metal from deep inside the earth. The thing about the Anunnaki was that they were kind of lazy. They genetically engineered human beings to be laborers. They created a whole race of humanoids out of the raw animal material lying around. I'm talking about monkeys. There are a lot of similarities between the Anunnaki creation myth and the legend of the Vanaras. The were-monkeys were created by a god, just as humans were engineered by the aliens. It could be that both stories have the same origin, both just a different version of the truth behind humankind's birth at the hand of a supreme creator entity. And by the way, in the Malay language, the word Raksasa means giant, which immediately brings to mind the Nephilim from the Bible. If the Vanaras were genetically engineered human-monkey hybrids cobbled together by the Anunnaki, maybe they did fight against the Rakshasa, who were in fact the giants of the Bible. Perhaps the Bible's Nephilim, described as abominations made by breeding angels and humans, in reality monkeys and aliens, were just one of the Anunnaki's failed experiments that had to be annihilated. Do you agree that it's possible that all these myths and legends are connected? Or is it just nonsense and drivel? Are people forcing these theories too much? Let me know what you think in the comments. Ancient ruins in Bolivia. The ancient city of Tiwanaku may have been destroyed by a cataclysmic event. Perhaps by the same cataclysmic event that I've been talking about repeatedly today, the legendary flood. The ruins of Tiwanaku can be found in Bolivia high up in the Andes Mountains. The ancient city is filled with imposing stonework that archaeologists can't wrap their head around. Huge stone structures like the enigmatic Akapana Pyramid or the mystifying Puma Punku are all that remain of the sophisticated society that lived here. But with all our modern technology, scientists can't figure out how the people of Tiwanaku cut and moved the stones. Radiocarbon dating shows that Tiwanaku was established about 1900 years ago. That places them in the same era as the Roman Empire. During the centuries that followed, they experienced a population boom. Everything was going great for Tiwanaku up until around 700 AD. They reached their peak and things began to decline. By the year 1000, nearly everybody had vanished. Some scientists have blamed their disappearance on the weather. Geologist Elliot Arnold at the University of Pittsburgh said increased dryness may have contributed to the abandonment of the city. Other theories, such as climate change, social unrest, or disease, could also have contributed to Tiwanaku's decline. But what if something far stranger happened? One of the biggest mysteries of Tiwanaku is the big blocks of granite that litter the place. Some of them weigh over 100 tons. They all fit together with the ease of oversized Lego blocks. The people of Tiwanaku were better builders than the Inca, who came hundreds of years later. How did they do all of this amazing work without mortar or cement? And why are so many of their interlocking stones just lying around? One theory is that Tiwanaku was hit by a flood. Not the flood, but a more recent one, only 1,000 years ago. It would make sense that the people had to flee and never came back, leaving all of their perfectly cut stones and walls in ruins. And it makes sense there would be more than one flood. Let me know in the comments what you think. Bimini Road, the way to Atlantis. The road to Atlantis might just be at the bottom of the ocean in the Bahamas. Just off the coast of North Bimini Island is something most scientists claim is just a rock formation. But to many others, it looks like a cobblestone street. The first time someone saw the road was in 1968. Divers were shocked to behold massive limestone blocks in the shape of perfect rectangles 18 feet underwater. It looked like the remains of either a road, a pier, or some sort of wall. It's hard to look at Bimini Road and not see stone blocks placed on purpose. The road runs for 1,500 feet before it suddenly ends in a curved hook. There are also two similar formations alongside the road, almost like they were meant to be bike paths or something. Scientists did investigate Bimini Road seriously in the 1970s. They determined the material to be made out of beach rock, a type of rock that forms naturally underneath beach sand. It is a very particular type of rock known for eroding into a cobblestone-like appearance. When scientists figured that out, they stopped investigating. They think there used to be a beach here, and that the beach rock eroded once the sea level rose. It wore away steadily for thousands of years, eventually looking like a paved road. There hasn't been any additional evidence found that Atlantis is in the Bahamas. Scientists haven't found any wheel ruts, no ruins, and no artifacts. But Robert M. Schach begs to differ. He is a geologist and author who has argued for the artificial origin of the Bimini Road. He has suggested that the stones were part of a larger, submerged city. Some researchers argue that the rectangular shape and alignment of the stones are too precise to be a result of natural processes. They suggest that the stones were intentionally placed in a specific pattern. Many enthusiasts and researchers have proposed theories linking the Bimini Road to ancient civilizations or extraterrestrial beings. What do you think? Road or natural? Let me know in the comments. The Sumerian King List. What if what we are taught is just a fraction of the truth? The Sumerian Kings List is a real text outlining 241,000 years of kings who ruled the Sumerian city-states. It's often used by ancient alien enthusiasts to support the idea of the Anunnaki controlling a vast antediluvian empire while they steadily stole all the gold from our planet. To them, the document even shows the transition from Anunnaki rule to the total destruction of civilization when the flood occurred. Then, the end of the list shows the slow recovery from annihilation to a human-only civilization with the Anunnaki and the Nephilim gone. The best preserved Sumerian kings list is not the type of document you're going to find at your local library. The document is a gigantic stone prism, a huge block of hard rock chiseled with line after line of cuneiform script. It is one of the earliest surviving historical texts from Mesopotamia, dating back to the Old Babylonian period, around 1830 to 1531 BC. The list is divided into several sections, each detailing the kings of a particular dynasty or city-state. It begins with a mythical first dynasty of Kish and ends with the third dynasty of Ur. The lengths of the reigns are often exaggerated, and some of the kings might be legendary or mythical figures. The list begins with the famous line, "After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was an Eridu." This is what ancient alien theorists use as physical evidence for the reference to the Anunnaki descending from space and establishing their first city on this planet. The very first king of planet Earth was Alulim, ruling for a staggering 28,800 years. Then came others, each one reigning for between 18,000 and 43,000 years. This section of the list ends with the simple yet impactful sentence, "Then the flood swept over." The next section of the list contains the names of well-known Mesopotamian gods and mythical kings. There are 23 kings who ruled over a total of 24,510 years. Each of them was king for between 300 and 1,500 years. The lifespan of rulers had plummeted dramatically since the time before the flood. People used to live for 40,000 years. Now they were only living for a couple hundred years, 1,000 maximum. The very last king during this dynasty was Aga of Kish, who happens to appear in the famous ancient poem Gilgamesh and Aga. Gilgamesh himself appears in the next section of the list as the king of Uruk, ruling for 126 years. You probably remember Gilgamesh from his great epic story of adventure. It is one of the earliest surviving great works of literature. After Gilgamesh, things just went downhill. His son reigned for a pitiful 30 years, then his grandson ruled for a measly 15. The names continue on and on through dynasty after dynasty, with a handful of people ruling for under 100 years and a few ruling for 300. Something had clearly changed in the rulers of the world. They had lost whatever was in them that allowed them to pretty much be immortal. Scientists don't think any of these kings even existed. Others believe they were aliens to start off, and then hybrid alien humans, and lastly human mortals. One Sargon of Akkad is listed, Sargon being the creator of the Akkadian Empire in 2270 BC. The dates are all normal. Nobody ever again ruled for an inhuman number of years. What do you think happened to explain the crazy anomalies of the ancient king list? Despite its limitations, the Sumerian king list is a valuable source of information about early Mesopotamian history. It provides insights into the development of Sumerian civilization, the political history of the Sumerian city-states, and the importance of kingship and divine authority in ancient Mesopotamian society. Pretty important stuff. Visitors to Australia. A group of archaeologists from Flinders University have made a connection no one ever thought possible. They identified very rare depictions of ancient Indonesian vessels in Australia. If these rock paintings are what scientists believe them to be, they are irrefutable proof that Southeast Asians traveled to the land down under. The rock art is staggering evidence of an unknown encounter between the indigenous people in Awunbarna, Australia, and a group known as the Moluccans. The Moluccans came from Indonesia. Scientists know this is where the travelers came from because of the distinct watercrafts depicted in the rock art. The indigenous Australians must have seen the boats and drew them from memory. This might sound surprising, but it wasn't for scientists from Flinders University. Maritime archaeologist Professor Wendy van Duvenvoorde already knew about the connection. Wendy said that Dutch explorers in the Moluccas reported locals making regular sailings to Australia as early as the 17th century. When Dutch traders established agreements with the elders in Indonesia to obtain things like turtle shells, many of their supplies came from Australia. The Moluccans were notorious raiders and traders. They were sort of like the Indonesian version of Vikings, taking what they wanted and pillaging the coastlines. The discovery of rock art does make one thing abundantly clear. This world is a lot smaller than most people realize, and has been for tens of thousands of years.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. The Algae Curse. The ancient Maya suffered from a curse of toxic algae. According to researchers from the University of Cincinnati, ancient Maya cities had such bad pollution in their water that it probably swept away dozens of cities as they were crippled by a devastating plague. And it was all because of algae. When these researchers looked at the ancient city of Tikal, which was built by the Maya in northern Guatemala in the 3rd century BC, they found something shocking. They looked at the 4 central reservoirs from where the civilians would have gotten their drinking water. What they found was toxic levels of pollution in all 4 of them. It's already suspected that drought, beginning in the 9th century, helped with the depopulation and the later abandonment of Tikal. But thanks to this new study, it looks like toxic water making everyone sick probably had a lot to do with it as well. In fact, it would have been a pretty traumatizing event for the Maya, who didn't understand what was happening. Their reservoirs had been miraculous pools of life, which people could drink out of and stay healthy. And suddenly, they had turned into places of disease, and just drinking water caused them to get sick. Researcher Kenneth Tankersley says the cyanobacteria inside the water would have made it extremely toxic, and there would have been algae blooms right on the surface of the water, which would have been visibly poisonous. The Maya undoubtedly believed that they had been cursed by the gods, and when the city was finally nothing but a cesspool of sick humans, everybody left. Drought in Arabia. 1,500 years ago, the Arabian Peninsula was hit by a devastating drought. This drought caused the collapse of the Himyarite kingdom, which created a power vacuum and led to the spread of Islam across the world. The Himyarite kingdom had an economy focused on agriculture. Their entire world was held together by an irrigation system, which transformed the deserts of Yemen into fertile fields for growing crops. This was what allowed the great kingdom to flourish for 300 years. But in the 6th century, they were struck by a curse. There was simply no more rain. Between the years 500 and 530, these people didn't get nearly the amount of rain they needed to keep their agricultural system going. This led to unimaginable strife within the kingdom and had them being conquered shortly after by the Aksumites of modern Ethiopia. It was at the time that the Himyar were collapsing that Islam began to spread in earnest. Everyone in the region was so distraught from the drought and the war that people were looking for something new to believe in. It started in Saudi Arabia around 632, spread through most of the Middle East by 661, and had made it to as far as northern Spain by 750. Cursed with Neanderthal gene. Modern human beings still have a lot of the genes from our Neanderthal ancestors. Sadly for some, they have been cursed with a very specific Neanderthal gene that actually opens up human cells to coronaviruses and increases the severity of the sickness. This was just discovered during the COVID-19 panini when researchers realized that an ancient gene passed down through generations spanning hundreds of thousands of years was making some people sicker than others. Some may think it's a curse to be born with a gene for red hair, or the one that causes male pattern baldness. But the real curse is getting the bad Neanderthal gene that makes you more susceptible to sickness. Here's the science behind it. Researchers say there is a small yet very significant number of people who have a certain gene variant from the extinct hominin called the Neanderthal. This gene variant doubles and sometimes quadruples the risk of major complications when infected with COVID-19. It all has to do with an enzyme called DPP4. This protein is what allows a coronavirus to bind with human cells, but those who have the DPP4 Neanderthal variant are given a second door into the cells, which allows for maximum infection. It's too bad there's no cheap way for people to check their own genome and see how much of their own DNA is made up from ancient Neanderthal DNA. Because even though some people are cursed with this unfortunate variant in their genes, others are blessed with their own specific variant that actually protects against COVID-19, also passed down from Neanderthals. Confusing, I know. And now for number 7. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Caroline Chirizola and daughter and Scott Dunbar for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. The Black Death. The Black Death was the most lethal plague in history. It's hard to even call this thing a curse. It was more like the worst event ever. The bubonic plague made its way across Eurasia and North Africa for over 200 years, between 1346 and 1553, and broke down 60% of the human population. To give you a rough idea of what that would mean in modern times, it would be like if around 4 billion people were killed. Those who suffered during these horrible days must have really thought the world was ending, or that they were in some kind of biblical apocalypse. The whole world had been cursed, and no civilization was spared. But of course, humanity recovered, the plague went away, and things got back to business as usual. Finally, after almost 500 years, scientists know exactly where the original Black Death patient came from. We're talking about patient 0, the one who started the whole terrible mess. Scientists have tracked the first case back to Kyrgyzstan, to the region of Issyk-Kul. This was once a major stop on the Silk Road in the 14th century. There is evidence in the form of a higher number of burials in the year 1338 and 1339. This was about 7 years before the actual plague outbreak. It looks like something happened in this region which started the disease, and then from Issyk-Kul, it spread over many decades to the rest of the world. The Curse of Cyprus. In 2008, archaeologists found a bizarre curse inscribed on a lead tablet on the southern coast of Cyprus. The curse comes from the old city kingdom of Amathus, which ruled the island in the 7th century. While this curse may not have brought down any great civilizations, it may have brought down one guy who angered the wrong person. The ancient curse is about as simple as it gets. The inscription on the tablet reads, "May your male part hurt when you make love." Somebody was obviously trying to curse a man so they couldn't be intimate anymore. The curse also showed the image of a man holding an hourglass in his right hand. This was almost like a warning, meaning the curse victim's time was up. According to Pierre Albert from the Athens Archaeological School in Greece, the curse is obvious evidence of witchcraft or shamanism. This is pretty remarkable because in the 7th century, Christianity was very much established in Amathus. It shows that even when Christianity was rooted strongly in one place, people would still turn to witches and dark magic when they needed to curse somebody's private parts. Rome's volcanic collapse. There was a volcanic eruption in Alaska that probably erupted sometime around early in 43 BC. Scientists believe this volcanic eruption triggered a climatic event which hastened the end of the Roman Republic. This isn't the Roman Empire, but the Republic that came before it. During the years 43 and 42 BC, Europe and North Africa were unseasonably cold and extremely rainy. In fact, it was colder than it had been in 2,500 years. Crops failed, famine broke out, and disease spread. There was social unrest, political upheaval, and Rome was quickly thrown into chaos. The volcano that blew its top was Mount Okmok on Umnak Island. The eruption was so big and powerful that climate scientists believe it caused the temperature to plunge 13 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 years straight in the Mediterranean. This may not have completely crippled Rome had it not come at the wrong time. The Republic was already on shaky grounds and seemed doomed to fail. Political and economic trouble was only worsened by the curse of darkness and cold that descended on Rome and scared the pants off the citizens. They were so terrified by whatever was happening that the freak weather pushed everyone over the edge. Julius Caesar was assassinated by 40 Roman senators, and the Roman Republic was dead. The Curse of Akkad. 4,000 years ago, the Akkadian Empire ruled over much of Mesopotamia. This was such a highly advanced society that they had roads spread all across the region and even boasted their own functioning postal service. The Babylonians and Assyrians, whose names you might be more familiar with, wouldn't come for many years later. And while those later civilizations may have done incredible things like invent geometry and look to the stars, the Akkadian Empire came first and laid the groundwork. For 200 years, they were the only power residing between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in control of Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. But just like the Sumerians who came before them, the Akkadians were destroyed. It happened around 2150 BC, when the rulers of Akkad lost their power and the whole thing collapsed. Archaeologists typically blame the unsustainable conquest strategy of Akkad for their downfall. The kings simply wanted to keep on pillaging and conquering, and this caused them to stretch themselves too thin and crumble. On the other hand, it could have been a curse. Shortly after the empire declined, a poem titled The Curse of Akkad was written. It told the story of Sargon I's grandson, Naram Sin, and how he plundered the temple of a weather god. It was such a despicable thing to do that the god cursed Naram Sin and the entire Akkadian empire to death. The poem says that after the curse, suddenly there was no grain. The skies refused to rain, and the people grew weak from hunger. While this may seem like just a story, it could actually be true. The part about the curse is probably just flair, but the bit about the lack of food and rain could be historically accurate. It could be that Akkad collapsed because it didn't rain, and they all ran out of food. Comet impact. From between roughly 200 BC and 300 AD, there was a vibrant and unique culture living in the Ohio Valley of North America. They were called the Hopewell culture, and most historians believe them to be the ancient ancestors of modern Native American tribes, like the Iroquois and the Algonquin. We know about the Hopewell because of the structures they left behind. All across the Ohio Valley are ancient mounds around 2,000 years old, and plenty of other artifacts. They were definitely here, and they were surprisingly sophisticated considering how long ago it was. But believe it or not, these ancient Native Americans may have met their end following a dramatic comet impact about 1,600 years ago. Their curse came from the sky. Researchers looked at 11 different archaeological sites and found fragments of micrometeorites. The only thing that makes sense is that these tiny fragments of meteorite rained down over the whole area following a violent airburst. 1 second, everything had been perfectly normal. The next, a giant piece of space debris exploded like an atomic bomb in the sky. Forest fires started immediately, crops were burned down, the landscape was scorched, and the Hopewell never recovered. The Björketorp Runestone. The Björketorp Runestone can be found in the small Swedish city of Blekinge. It's by far one of the most ominous stones anywhere on the planet. It's also one of the tallest runestones ever found, measuring over 12 feet tall. It was made sometime in the 6th century, carved with a chilling message in the Proto-Norse language. Before we look at the message, it's important to know what runes were used for by the Vikings. These were normally tools to communicate with the gods. There are 2 different inscriptions. On one side of the rock is written something that translates to, "I predict perdition." On the other side is what seems like a terrifying prophecy. It says something like, "I, master of the runes, conceal here runes of great power. Plagued by maleficence, doomed to insidious death, is he who breaks this monument." And then a separate line says, "I prophesy the destruction." Nobody really knows what all this stuff means, but it certainly doesn't seem good. In fact, it feels a lot like an ancient prophecy that the end is coming. Cassandra of Troy, the cursed prophetess. Cassandra of Troy lived under a great and terrible curse. Cassandra was the prophetess of Troy, a character straight out of Greek mythology. In fact, we're not really sure if Cassandra of Troy truly existed, like many of the characters from the Trojan War, or if she was just a plot device. Either way, she was cursed with the gift of prophecy. The Trojan priestess was dedicated to the god Apollo and was given utter and true prophecies of the future. She was also the daughter of Troy's king Priam and queen Hecuba, and her older brother was Hector. In mythology, Cassandra was coveted by the god Apollo himself. But when she denied him, he cursed her that even though she could see the future, nobody would ever listen to her. And so it was that even as Cassandra warned the Trojans that the death of their people was imminent, nobody believed her. Troy ended up being burned to the ground, her brother was killed, and she was taken away by the cruel Greek king Agamemnon to be his slave mistress. Although it's unclear whether Cassandra was a real person, she did appear a lot in historical stories, from Homer's Odyssey to Virgil's poem Aeneid, and this suggests that even if she wasn't magical, she was probably based on a real historical figure. Thanks for watching! What do you think is the scariest way for civilization to come crumbling down? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!